Alright guys, today we're going to be interviewing my girlfriend about her thoughts and opinions on modern dating, and then also her experiences as well. I'm going to be giving some input as to my opinions and thoughts on it, just because it's a little bit different from both perspectives. Alright, so the first thing I want to start off with is, has dating been good or bad for you?
Mostly bad. I think it's because a lot of like what I'm looking for in a guy doesn't really exist most of the time. You were kind of like a diamond in the rough type thing where it was like, wow, I didn't know guys like that still existed.
Yeah, but from what I've seen, like from kind of like seeing your history a little bit, you didn't choose like the best type of guys.
Yeah. I definitely think it has to do with the kind of guys that I attract. So
I'm curious. So like the guys that you attract, like how did you meet them, or like, you know, like how did you end up having some sort of relationship with them? Like was it in person, was it online, and then how did it go from there?
I think the majority were in person for a very long time, up until I reached about my early 20s. Then once I reached my early 20s, it kind of turned more towards online dating, and then sometimes those online dating experiences would become like real life dating experiences, and we would try it out like that, but there's problems with that too. So,
and do you think it's better, like let's say, to meet a guy online or in person, or it's not really a big difference? Because like honestly, I think it's like majority of relationships in today's generation, almost all of them start off online now.
I think it's a case by case thing. Like some people have their preferences. My preference is meeting someone in person first, because sometimes you'll get a vibe off that person right away, and you'll be able to kind of be like, yeah, is this a person I want to meet again? Is this a person I want to continue talking to? Online, you kind of like, you can get it a little bit, but not as much as if you were meeting up in person. So online, they could be presenting themselves as someone completely different, kind of similar to catfishing, and then once you meet in person, they're like nothing the same.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask you is, essentially, on like modern dating, like do you think it's going well for like the vast majority of people, or like do you think people are just like not really dating, just having fun? Or
I think it's a mix. People definitely know like which online dating sites are more for like hookups, one night stands, like, oh, I need a special friend for the night, you know? So a lot of people know, hey, I could go to this site and that's good for that. I don't think there's really any dating sites where you can be like, you hear people be like, yeah, this is great for dating, except like the commercials. Like you see commercials where they really try and pimp it out and make it seem like it's really good, but you don't hear people saying, like people who have used it, like your friends and stuff like that, be like, yeah, no, this is really good, like I met my longtime fiance on this site. Like you don't really hear that a whole lot. So
I mean, it does happen, but those occasions are rarely, like, you know. And honestly, like I think online dating, it's like the competition for guys, it's very difficult, especially for guys to like land up on dates, just because I think you talked about this, that you get a lot more matches on the dating platforms, but the quality of guys aren't to your preference.
Yeah, so, and sometimes it could just be like the way that they're presenting themselves. Like it could, like, again, this is the difference between meeting someone in person and someone online. They may not be a very photogenic person. They may not know how to take pictures of themselves or how to really write up a dating profile. So when you look at their profile, you're like, this isn't really a guy I really want to give a chance, and you swipe by them. But you can meet them in person and they could be like a completely terrific person. They could be with a great personality, good looks, the whole nine, you know? But because they don't know how to present themselves online, it just makes it harder to want to have, like, it makes it harder for you to be like, yeah, let's give them a chance, you know? Like, you're more like, no, I don't think I will. So
you're more off-put by it, and you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna just ignore this person and just continue on with your day looking for somebody else, essentially.
Yeah. And something else that I think is kind of rude that people have been doing, and it's happened to me, is like ghosting, where you'll start talking and it seems like things are going really well, and then they just disappear off the face of the earth. I feel like that's kind of not the best move. Like, I feel like it's more of a courtesy to tell people, like, hey, I know you're afraid to hurt people's feelings, but I feel like it's more of a courtesy to be like, hey, I know we've been talking, but I'm just not feeling it, but you're a great person, good luck. And
so like I know where you're totally coming from, but like, honest, it's like so much easier just to ghost somebody and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna just unmatch this person and then not even have to deal with it. And don't get me wrong, that's happened to me a couple of times. It's just a part of the process, but I feel like that doesn't happen as much to women. But then again, I'm not too sure exactly. I mean, I know, like, I had chicks say like, hey, if you're not interested, just tell me, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm not interested, and they get hurt. But then again, I can tell, you know, it's not as bad as being ghosted.
Yeah, it gives you that closure, because I have been ghosted a couple of times. And sometimes that's why those girls have told you that, because they have been ghosted before. So we have just gotten used to it to the point to where we're just straight up with men most of the time. We're like, if you're not interested, if you don't want anything to do with me, just say something. Because it's better to have the rejection of someone telling you, hey, yeah, I'm not feeling it, rather than you keep messaging them and they're not messaging you back, or you block them or whatever. It makes it hurts more. That hurts more than a rejection.
So, this is something that, like, out of between guys and girls, essentially, who do you think's looking more for relationships and all that, or it's not really? It's a combination of both.
No one's looking for a relationship anymore. So you see that women aren't really wanting to get married anymore, and that's also kind of creating like a lot of toxicity in like the dating world. So it's harder for men to find these long-term relationships where they want to stay and they want to have a good dating experience. Now it's kind of like a free-for-all. I see people where they're just like, yeah, well, as long as we have fun, whatever, but then they don't like putting titles on the relationship, and they're trying to keep it open. They're trying to keep their options open, and I feel like that can be kind of very unhealthy. So I don't think anyone is really looking for a hardcore relationship anymore. And if people are, all of what I just said is making it harder for them to find a good, genuine relationship.
So I'm gonna go based off of, you know, the past experience with some of the guys that have interest in you, but of course you're in a relationship. But like, there's times that, you know, just women just in general, they're not in a relationship and they are looking for a guy, but they don't attract the type of men that they want. And like, the men that they want is like really like super high quality guys, which I would say like they're very few. They're like the superstars pretty much. And so a lot of these guys are just ignored. There's a lot of guys out there that, you know, want relationships and all that. As you seen, you had several guys that had interest in you, but you were actually in a relationship. So what are your thoughts on that?
Something strange that I've noticed personally is when I'm already in a relationship is when more people come around and more people are wanting to date me. But when I'm single, it seems like it's harder to find a date. It's harder to get someone to want to date you. And I don't know what it is about that. And it's happened to me multiple times, not just in this relationship and past relationships, where it's like I'm getting hit up by either exes or newcomers, and it's kind of like, you know, I'm in a relationship. Why are you coming to me now? I don't know if it's because it's that old classic saying of like, you want what you can't have. Like, they know I'm in a relationship and they know they can't have me, but they want to try it anyways. And it's like, that's dumb. Why are you trying to do that? There are plenty of single people out there that you could be trying to pursue, but you're trying to pursue someone in a relationship.
So this is something like kind of tagging onto that. I actually noticed that as well, just like in like going to my day-to-day basis. Obviously it's probably not as much that happens as much as you'd like to you, but essentially, like, I noticed, then again, I wasn't paying attention in other relationships, like, hey, is this person interested in me or not? Like, you know, it kind of goes over my head. But like, now that I'm like just like learning like certain little subtle cues, and then I think now that I became more attractive, I kind of noticed that. But like when I got into this relationship, I noticed like women are more interested in me, and I kind of know like a psychology a little bit about that. Like women want what they can't have, and then they kind of sense that you're not really paying attention to them, so they kind of make the effort to go out of their way.
And I think I kind of know a little bit about so there's this tactic that I've seen men use, and I know it's pretty legit. So what they do is they make it seem like they're not interested to a woman who they know this woman is obviously into them. So it's kind of like, oh, well, they try and act like they don't see any of the flirtation, and, oh, well, you look nice today, I guess. Like, they make, like, subtle comments and stuff like that. Drives this woman crazy. She throws, like, everything she can at him and, like, tries to make herself more presentable to the guy. And then, like, sometimes they go for it, and sometimes the guys just get the thrill out of doing it. But I'm like, I kind of think it's good that sometimes these guys are doing that, because women think they can always just get what they want, and I feel like it's better for guys to kind of play a little hard to get sometimes. But sometimes that can backfire. Like, you play it a little too hard, and then the woman becomes uninterested, and then you lose. It's a lose-lose situation on that one. So I think that one's a very thin line.
So knowing that you have experience dating guys and girls, essentially, explain your experiences with that. Like do you find it easier to date like guys or women just in general, or has it been mixed between both?
I think it's been kind of mixed. Like, when it came to dating like women, I think the hardest part was kind of communication. And it was like, I'd be like, okay, so we're gonna meet up at this spot at this time, whatever. And she'd be like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I'd be like, okay, cool. And then I'd be there waiting for like 15-20 minutes, and she'd show up like late, and then it'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, like, I was having to get ready, you know how it is. And it's like, I gave you a time, like, I expect you to be on time. Like, if you're like 5 minutes late, I don't care. But if it's almost bordering like a half an hour late, and your excuse is that you were putting on makeup, like, to me, makeup isn't as important. Like, I know you want to look good for the date, but that's not as important to me as punctuality. My time is important, you know? Like, and I feel like if you can't respect me and respect my time, then why am I going to give you that? And it's kind of the same thing with men, but I've noticed that men most of the time will either be on time or will show up earlier, and I kind of appreciate that a little bit more. But women make it feel like you're expected to wait. You have to wait for them, or else then you're the one that's in the wrong, and I've never really liked that.
So I'm curious about this. Like, has guys like ever just shown up late?
I've actually never had a guy really show up late unless he's had like a really legitimate reason. And it was only about 2 guys, and one, it was because there was a car accident, and then the other, I forgot what happened, but they had legit reasons. But women, most of the time, they'll be like, tee-hee, sorry I'm late, and you're like, okay, but why were you late? And then they'll be like, oh, you know, and then like they just play it off like it's totally normal to be late.
Yeah, no, and see, I know what you're talking about, because like that's happened to me several times, that like women just show up late. There was even one time where, you know, like that viral video that I showed you with that cheesecake one, where that dude waited like an hour. I was that dude at one point where I waited an hour, and then the person finally showed up, and it wasn't even worth the wait. I was wasting my time, which it made me realize, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna start showing up late on dates. I made that a general rule. Like, there's literally been times where I'm like, I'm gonna meet up, hang out with some chicks, separate occasions of course, but essentially I'm like, hey, I'm running late, so like, let's say I'm telling them, hey, let's meet here at 5. At 5 I'm barely leaving, and I'm like, okay, I'm on my way, I ran into traffic or something. I come up with like some little minor excuse, and I learned that women actually, they kind of view that a little bit more attractive. They're less likely to flake on you. Yep. And you have something to say on that?
There's a reason why. It's because I don't view it that way, but I know a lot of women do view it that way, because, you know, have friends. But the reason why they view it as more attractive if a guy is like a little bit more late or like right on time rather than being early is because they're like, oh, this guy is kind of like a simp. He's kind of like, he's like, they don't see it as, oh, he's going out of his way, he's showing he wants to put effort into this, how cute. They don't see it like that. They're like, he's a simp. Like, they don't view it the same way as you might view it. You might be like, oh, well, I want to get there early and make a good impression on her. They don't view it the same way. They don't view it like that. And they also see that as like a way that they can manipulate you. They're like, oh, well, this just shows that he wants to do good in this relationship. And they think that they can manipulate you by being like, oh, well, if you care about me, will you do this and stuff like that. They'll do little subtle things because they already know that they can twist you around because you're showing them that they can, you know?
Okay, so another question. So essentially, going based off that, who do you think puts more effort into the relationship? Like, is it 50-50, or do you think one tries more than the other?
In most cases that I've seen, it really seems like the guy puts in the majority of the effort. Don't get me wrong, there are relationships where they either put in mutually, or some girls will go out of their way if they really, really like a guy. But most of the time in a relationship, it's unbalanced. Someone is putting in more effort than somebody else, and most of the time it is the man. The man is putting in way more effort. He's the one that's having to pay for all the dates. He's the one that's having to drive everywhere. He's the one that's having to plan the dates. It's like the woman is just expected to be treated out. And like, not all women are like that, but I've noticed that the vast majority of women now are kind of like that. Like about 70%-ish are really like, no, you do everything for me and I'm just gonna sit back and expect it of you.
Yeah, no, and see, I kind of know what you're talking about. That's why I made it like a general rule that I never spend money on the first date. But going based off of your experiences, because you had experience with both, have you noticed, like, what is it, has like any woman kind of like taken the lead, hey, we're gonna meet here, or anything like that? No, or has it been you?
No, it's always had to be me. I don't want to say that I'm usually the lead in the relationships, but it seemed like when I was dating women, I was always the lead. Like, I always had to be like, okay, we're gonna go watch this movie at whatever time, and then we'll see what happens from there. And then afterwards, like, if you don't have anything planned, they're saying they throw out ideas of what they want to do, but beforehand they weren't trying to make any plans or anything like that. And it's kind of like they already expected you to have that plan in place. Like, the reason I gave the movie theater one was because I literally took this girl on the date to a movie theater, and afterwards I was just planning on like going home, and she was like, well, aren't we gonna go eat? And I was just like, oh, are you hungry? And she was like, well, I thought we were planning on going to eat after. And I was just like, oh no, I didn't know. I thought we were just gonna end the night here. And she was like, yeah, well, you could at least take me out to go eat. And I was just like, oh, I'm sorry. And I really thought it was my fault, but looking back on it now, it was kind of like, well, if she wanted to go eat afterwards, I told her that we were gonna go watch this movie. We could have talked about it. I could have even made a reservation to go somewhere. I could have made a cool little dinner date type thing after the movie, but she didn't say anything until after we were already planning on ending the night. So
I guess a question for you on that dinner date experience. So essentially, was this like the first date that you guys went out on?
Yeah, it was like kind of like we had kind of known each other, but not really. So it was really our first time really interacting with each other. And then, like, that's why I thought, oh, movie theater is a great way, because we can kind of go and we can see, like, oh, well, what kind of person are they afterwards? Maybe talk before the movie, get to the movie early, talk before the movie, maybe talk a little bit after the movie, and end the night and see if they want another date. But I thought, hey, like, at the time I was like, hey, maybe she just wanted to talk more after the fact. But she expected me to treat her out to food. And then after, like, when we were eating, she didn't really talk to me. She kind of was just on her phone the whole time, and I thought that was weird. So yeah. It was kind of like I was, like, just, like, a ticket for food that night. It wasn't that she wanted to get to know me more. It was just she wanted food. Yeah, and see, like, that happens to quite a bit of guys. It's just, like, you know, a foodie call. It's just, like... A foodie call? Yeah, so they pretty much get, you know, a free meal. And that's why I made a general rule, never pay on a date. And as you saw when we met... We just met literally in the parking lot. We just started talking, and I just learned from experience that, hey, don't pay for food just for, you know, somebody that you don't really know. The most I'll probably go is a coffee. That's not too much. But I noticed, like, in my experiences, it's hard to just, you know, get like a coffee date. It's like, oh,
I want to go eat somewhere or something like that, and like, and I already know better, so I know not to do that.
And for guys who are kind of like, they're already used to like, well, I'm used to getting food on the first date, and how you were just saying it's hard to get like a coffee date where it's just coffee. I think the best way to go about that is to try and create kind of like a date where you're not spending money, but you also do something cool at the same time. So that way, not only do you get to kind of talk to that person, you get to kind of see where it goes, and if they're just looking for the money of the experience, or if they're looking for the experience of you.
So I know what you're talking about, because like I ended up doing that. So I think it was like one of the first times I met one of these chicks or something like that. She had like a dog, and then I was like, hey, we should do a hike sometime, take the dogs. And she was actually down for that. And you know, it's a little bit nervous meeting somebody that you don't really know, but it was actually a decent experience, because like I did a nice hike, took my dog out, she got to run around, you know, it was a good experience.
And sometimes those are what make the best experiences in a relationship. Not everything should have to be about money. Like I went on a date one time where we went basically caving, I guess is what you could call it, and I never even knew these caves existed, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And it was a date where we didn't have to spend any money. It was just kind of a cool experience overall to have. And it's like, yeah, even if the relationship doesn't work out, it kind of sets the standard, you know. It's like, well, we don't have to go to these like 5-star restaurants where you're spending like thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars on like food. Instead, it's kind of like we could go off and do cool experiences in places we've never been before, or whatever, and that makes it more worthwhile.
Yeah.
So even if you don't stay in that relationship, you still have that memory for a long time to come, because it makes more of a impact on you rather than, oh, we're just gonna get food. Yeah. You eat so many meals a day. How important is food going to be in the grand scheme of things? It's not going to be something that's cemented in your brain forever.
Yeah. And see, that's why I want to kind of go back to the movie date, because that kind of reminded me. Essentially, like, I don't like movie dates, because like you don't get to know the person, because you're just watching a movie. You're just watching a screen for like 2 hours, and you don't really get to talk and know that person and really see their personality type. You can see like what kind of stuff they're interested in, like movie types, but like that's as far as you're gonna get into. This is the way how I view it.
And that kind of makes sense. And at the time, I hadn't really thought about that, because I do get what you're saying, and I do kind of share the same kind of opinion on that. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about it, because it's like, well, when you first start dating, and she was probably the second girl I had ever dated, I didn't really know what to do. I was like, well, what's a good date idea? And sometimes you don't know, and you're like, well, people typically go to the movie theater, I'll take her to the movies, you know. So that was my mentality. I wasn't even thinking about like, oh well, let's really go do something where we can really go and talk, because I was panicking over what's a good date idea. So.
And see, I was in the exact same boat, so I know where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, it's kind of hard when you first get out there dating. And like, as you get experience and as you continue going on, you kind of get an idea of like, well, this is what I want to do for future dates, like, or this is like the way I want to do them. Like my first date, I want to do this, but the second date could be like the movie theater type thing.
So I actually do have a question for you. So I don't think I ever asked you this one before. So I asked you on the guy part, but like, so what's the longest relationship you had with a guy and a girl? Like, separate times, obviously, but...
So. I think for a guy, it was 8 months is the longest. Well, technically now it's 9 longest, because we've been together longer. But past experiences, 8 months. Female, only 5. The longest I ever had was 5, and it's just because I feel like it's a lot harder to date women than it is to date men.
Yeah.
Personally, and it has nothing like yeah, attraction and all of that comes into play, but it's harder it was harder for me to maintain a relationship with a woman than it was with a man.
Oh, okay. And see, with me, longest relationship I had was 5 years.
Yeah.
Which, then again, we met in middle school, so yeah, I find it like relationships kind of like where you meet them like naturally, they go a little bit better. But then I see today's generation, they're not really interacting with each other. So I see like relationships are not really happening that often, and then people aren't like, we kind of made it where it's like a little bit like taboo to just talk to somebody in person, which, like, what is it? There was that article where I showed you, like, people are just afraid to talk to people on the phone, and that's just talking on the phone. So I could just imagine in person, like, today's generation, they're just so used to texting. Instead of just making a phone call, it's a whole lot easier. You can send your message a whole lot simpler just by a phone call. You're like, oh, okay, well, I know what this person is talking about, than a text message, which can be interpreted different ways.
And I think it's because we're not like the generations that came before us, where it was all either social interaction or payphone, or when phones were first starting to come out. Now technology, like, everyone has a cell phone. You almost know almost nobody that doesn't have one. People still, even, like, you don't see them as much anymore, but even people that don't have a personal cell phone still have like a home phone of some kind, you know? So I think, and like me personally, I get anxiety when I talk on the phone, and I think it's just because I wasn't raised on talking on the phone. I was raised kind of more, okay, let's talk in person, and if you don't get the chance to talk in person and you don't have to talk on the phone, I prefer texting.
Yeah.
And it's just because of that anxiety of the phone call, and I don't know why I get anxious when it comes to a phone call.
Like, that's just the thing with like today's younger generation. They're like, they don't do phone calls, and with me, I notice, like, if I'm able to get a phone call, I'm actually able to land up a date, and it becomes like successful. Like, it increases my